Hey aviators, in this episode we're going to be talking about traffic patterns. What do we do when we exit the runway, when we take off from the runway, or when we're trying to fly back to an airport? There's a certain type of pattern that the airplanes actually have to fly so we don't have any, kind of mid-air collisions or anything like that. So if everybody's flying in the same direction, the chances of that happening is probably slim to none, right? So let's say we have our runway right here. We're going to have our runway going in this direction right here. And if you ever wondered what these numbers on the end of the runway is, let's say that this is north up here, south, and east and west. Is that right? I don't think so. How can we decide, how can we remember this? Well, what I do, because I used to get confused like this too, if you put W and then E, that spells we. Maybe that's a silly way to remember it, but hey, that's how I always remember it when I was first learning all these cardinal directions. So we have north, south, east, and west. Now, if you have a degree here, so let's say this is 0, or let's say this is 360, because there's 360 degrees in a circle, right? So if I go from 360, or let's say 0, to make this a little bit simpler, and I go 90 degrees to the right, that heading essentially is going to be 090 to go eastwards. So if I go 90 degrees this way, I'm going to be heading 090. If you remember in those little math equations, if there's a perpendicular angle right here, if it's a perfect 90 degrees, I don't know if you remember that little angle right there, that little box right there will signify that it's a perfect 90 degrees. Well, it's the same thing here. So if I do so we have north all the way to 90. I'm sorry, yeah, this is 90 degrees, so 090. This is, so if I'm facing 090, I'm going to the east. And if I keep on going, 90 plus another 90 is going to be south. So 90 is equal to 180. Going 90 more, that's going to equal 270. And then all the way another 90, that's going to actually equal 360. So let's get rid of these. Let's say 360. So now that we know that 090 is east, 180 is south, 270 is west, 360 is north. Now, to make it even more confusing, the numbers on your heading indicator, and also the same with the numbers on the runway, they just omit the last third digit on there. So it'll look something like this. However, if it's just a single digit, like for example right here we have 9, not even going to have a 0 in front of it. They're just going to have a 9 right there. And this is how the directional compass works. This is how the runways are lined up. So if we're going to be going this direction, 270, then we're going to be putting 27 on there, indicating that in order to line up on 27, we're going to be heading up a heading of 270. So 270, hey, line up for runway 27. Vice versa. If we're going eastbound, we're going to have a number 9 on this end. So this is going to be number 9. And that's literally typically how runways are aligned. Now, if it is 273 or 274, they're just going to round it off to the nearest degree. So in this case, if it is 273, they're not going to put a 273 there. They're just going to leave it as 27. So that's the easy way how you can decipher which runway that you're going to be lining up with. Like for example, hey, you're clear to land straight in runway 9er. Well, we know that runway 9er is going to be coming from this direction. So if we are heading south, or if we're heading north, we know exactly, let's say for example we're heading north, we're going north, we know that we got to turn our airplane in some way to line up our aircraft to land on going this direction, landing on runway 9. So now with that being said, we can get rid of this really quick. Now let's use that same incidence where we were coming from the south, right? So we're flying northbound, we're coming from the south, going upwards, going toward north. Now we were cleared to land on runway 9er. So what we have to do is we have to know the traffic pattern. So there's two traffic patterns. There's either left traffic or there's right traffic. So how we know about this is, let's say we're coming off of runway 9er. We take off runway 9er, and a traffic pattern, all it is a racetrack pattern over the airport, over the runway. So we have these individual racetrack patterns, and each of these directions, they're actually called legs. So here's a leg, this is a leg, and that is a leg. Now this legs, now notice they're all turning leftward, left, left, left. This would be considered a left pattern for runway 9er. So what is this leg called? This leg is called an upwind leg. This leg is called the crosswind leg. Let's see if I can, I'm going to write it this way, crosswind leg. This leg is called the downwind leg. This next one is called the base leg. And the final, this is called the final leg. So I'm going to write final right here. Now notice that you heard some winds in there. We got upwind, crosswind, downwind. What does this even mean? So in aerodynamics for our wings love to have airflow over the wings. So here's our side profile of your wing. And if the wind is going this direction, you're going to have a lower pressure on the top of the wing and a higher pressure on the bottom of the wing. The more wind is going this way, the more lift you have on your wing. Essentially, the faster you're going through the air, the better your wing is going to perform. So if we actually align the aircraft to go into the wind, that will tell you that, hey, I don't even have to use the entire runway to take off to reach my VR speed. The runway in use is always going to be orientated so the airplane is facing into the wind while you're taking off and landing. So if the winds are coming from 090, again, here's our compass right here. So here's the 360, 090, 180, and 270. So if the winds are coming from 090, they're going this way. Well, look at that. The winds are going that way. So when you take off, you're literally going into the wind. So as soon as you put the throttle, the wings already feel like they're going faster than what they really are for ground speed. So that's why we have an upwind here, because you're literally going up into the wind, all right? Now a crosswind, this is your crosswind leg because you're flying across the wind. Makes sense? And then here, you're going down with the wind. So this is where your ground speed is going to be highest, and then you're going to have the winds coming from behind you. So this is kind of where you're going to be going fastest with your ground speed. And then here, right here, is going to be your base leg, getting ready to set up for final. Now, as I mentioned before, this is all these turns are going to the left. So in order to make it even more confusing, this is going to be your upwind. Now when you go the crosswind, it's going to be left crosswind from runway 9er. If you just say crosswind, this can also be going this way too. And this would be considered a right pattern. So there's going that way, there's this way, and there's this way. The names are the same exact. So this is your downwind. This is your crosswind. And this is your, I guess I can just write it in here. This is your base. Now, let's say we're taking off runway 9er and the tower says, hey, maintain left traffic. So we're taking off runway 9er. Do I have my little airplane? I have a big one here. I don't know if this is going to be, yeah, this might be a little bit too big, but I'm going to use it anyway. All right. So we're taking off runway 9er. Got our runway, got our engine speed's alive, engine's green, and VR rotate 55. We're going up, climbing. We're going up into the wind, so now we're up in our upwind leg. And left pattern, that means we're going to be doing left turns. So left turn, so now I'm on my left crosswind for runway 9er. And now I'm going to turn left downwind for runway 9er. And here I'm going to be turning left base for runway 9er, and then finally final. Now notice there is no left or right for when it's final, because there is no left or right final. It's just final is final. And same thing here. There's no left or right upwind. It's just upwind. So now let's go back to where we were coming from. We are arriving from the airport, coming from the south, flying up from the south to land at runway 9er. How do we enter this traffic pattern? The best way to enter a traffic pattern is midfield. Midfield is literally, if you split the field in half, that right there is midfield right there. Now, you don't really want to I'm gonna move this kind of over here. Downwind. If I can spell right. Alright. So if you're coming into the traffic pattern and you're coming in directly just like this. Now you're going about 110, maybe 100 knots, 90 knots. It's going to be very hard for you to get right on that downwind and make a sharp 90-degree turn with the plane. What's going to happen is you're probably going to end up going inside, getting a little bit too close to the runway, or you may have to do a turn ahead of time, and then by the time you're already rolled out, you're already going to be abeam the numbers. A beam is just literally when you are flying your airplane. I'm flying my airplane, and then once I see my wing is right level with whatever I'm looking at, right next to me, 90 degrees, that's a beam. So you looking at me right now, you are a beam of my wings right now. And if I were to look this way, and if I'm over here, I'm going to be a beam the numbers. So that's kind of where you kind of don't want to be once you start entering the traffic pattern. You kind of do want to be right in the midfield. Another reason why is because towers will normally ask you to report midfield once you're entering the pattern. So one of the things to avoid from having you do flying too close to the runway or way over here being established is you enter the pattern at a 45-degree angle. So here's a little angle right here, 45 degrees. This is the best angle to enter your traffic pattern. Why? Because as you're going in, you're coming in at a nice intercept angle. If there's any other traffic around, you can literally see them very, very clearly. And the same if you're coming down here. Very clear, you can see everything. And make sure you're also at traffic pattern altitude when you're in the pattern. It's so much easier to see other traffic if they're all at the same altitudes. If you're at 1,000 feet and then you got another person that's at 800 feet or way up high, it's gonna be it's gonna be a lot more difficult to see. You might be able to pick them out because you got a white Cessna with a contracting background, maybe. There's been some times where there would be some experimental aircraft that would be like, for example, red or a darker color, and they are very hard to see. Not only is it important for you to be at traffic pattern altitude, for you to see other traffic, but also for them to see you as well. So we're coming in at 45, okay, now we're established. We report to the tower, Cessna 12345. We are established midfield right downwind for runway 9er. Again, it's all going to be right turns for your right pattern. That's another way how you can figure out what pattern you're going to be in. Another tip that you could remember too is when you are on a downwind, if the runway is to your right side, then you're in the right pattern. If you're over here and the runway is on the left side of you going this way, then you're on the left pattern. It's an easy way to distinguish of how you're going to enter this pattern. Another question that is normally asked to me is how close and how far is this downwind leg? Can I be here? Can I be here? Can I be down here? How can I distinguish of what's the best distance? What you can do is on your wing strut, when you are flying, you're gonna have your wing strut. I'm gonna use this right here. I have my wing strut right there, okay? And there we go. Here's your wing strut. Now, halfway up your wing strut, if you're looking outside of your airplane, your wing strut, so I'm in the cockpit and this is my wing strut. The runway, if I'm looking out of my right window, if I'm sitting on the left side of the seat, left side of the airplane, and I'm going down the runway, look at your wing strut. Your runway should be literally halfway up your wing strut. If it's a little high up on your wing strut, then that means you're probably too far. If the runway seems a little bit lower on your wing strut, you're probably a little bit too close. And I'll show you an example of what I mean here in a minute. Actually, let's do that right now. Okay, so we're sitting in the airplane now. Now let's say we are on the right downwind. And as I said, how far or how close are you at a reasonable distance, or how far is a reasonable distance from the runway when you're on the downwind? So as I said before, just look at your strut. Here's your strut right there. So if you look at your runway way off in the distance, and your runway is lining up right around here, like your horizon's right there, that means you're probably a little bit too far. And now if your runway is kind of like down here, really close to the bottom of the window, you're probably a little bit too close. You're about to overfly the runway. So an ideal spot on your strut is to have the runway literally right here, cutting your strut right in half. Kind of like where that lawnmower is right there, and then the wall, where it kind of, the wall meets the ground right there. That's literally, ideally, of where you want your runway to be when you're on the downwind. And vice versa on the left downwind, the same thing. You want your runway to be literally halfway up your strut. So the runway in the background should be right around here. Again, if the runway in the background is up here, up high up on your strut, you're a little too far. If it's down below, near your window opening, you're probably a little bit too close. So the ideal, have the runway in the background about halfway up your strut. Okay, so that's how you figure out how close or how far you are from the runway. So when you are here, when do you turn your base? Well, when the runway numbers or your threshold or your landing point is literally 45 degrees off of your shoulder. So here's 45 degrees. So you're flying, and you're still looking back, Or let's say if you're on the left downwind, you're still looking back, and right when it's 45 degrees off of your shoulder, no matter which left or right pattern you're in, that is when you're gonna start your base. So it's 45 degrees here, then I'm gonna start my base, and then right here, make sure that every one of these turns is a nice 90-degree pattern. You don't really want your pattern to be looking like this. I know this happens a lot. In order to prevent this, what we can do is what I mentioned earlier on your heading bug, on your heading indicator. Notice how I said that all of these are literally the coordinates for the runway heading. So what you can do with your heading bug is let's make this our heading bug. Okay. Now if we're flying 270, right? We're flying 270. So right now we'll have this up here on the top of our heading bug, 27. We're gonna have 36 over here. We're gonna have 90 right here, and we're gonna have 180 here. Remember, this is going to be on the top because you're flying 270. So if I want to make a nice 90 degrees, a really nice 90-degree base, what heading would I have to fly? Well, 90 degrees to my right, since I'm doing a right turn, is going to be 360. If your aircraft is equipped with a heading bug, please use these heading bugs. Put your heading bug right there on the 36. So when you are turning, you're going to turn to heading 360, and you're going to be at a nice 90 degree. Now also keep in mind that there is precession and there's some little errors on your and your heading indicator. So in order to be even more precise before you even enter the traffic pattern, go ahead and realign your heading indicator to your compass. So once you're here, we're just going to rinse and repeat. We're going to go to, let's see, 36. So now we're heading 360. We're on our base now. So now this is 36, this is 9, this is 180, and this is 27. Same exact thing applies. We're going up, and now in order to make our right turn, to make it nice and perfect, we have to turn 90 degrees. So our next heading would be 090. Same thing when you're going upwind. If, let's say, we're going to do a left pattern, and I want to make my pattern nice and rectangular. You definitely want your pattern to be rectangular because this is what your examiner is going to be expecting you to do on the check ride, because it is actually in the ACS. It's called a rectangular pattern. Let's keep these patterns nice and rectangular. So if I'm taking off a runway 9, so 9er is in front of me, I have 18, 27 behind me, and I have 36 here. So if I'm going to make a left pattern, I'm going 090, I'm taking off, I want to make a left pattern, nice and rectangular. Well, what heading is 90 degrees to the left? Well, it's going to be 360. So you can put your heading bug on 360, and as soon as you are at whatever altitude that your aircraft desires, let's say you're in the upwind until you reach 700 feet. 700 feet, then you're going to go ahead and turn to your heading of 360. Same thing again, turn to a heading of 270. Now, when we start getting into ground reference maneuvers, we will actually apply this, but with wind correction. This right here, the headings that you can follow, this is only for a calm, no wind situation. For example, if you are going, let's say 270, and you got the winds going this way, well, 270, you're going to keep on, you're going to be flying 270, but look what the wind's doing to your airplane. Next thing you know, you're going to be flying right into the oncoming traffic. So that's something you don't want to do. And we'll get into ground reference maneuvers and why we do them in another video. But for now, this is the basics of the traffic patterns.